for today's hottest software at the Intel Pentium processor for the next generation of compatible power.
Wait. Let me go back. Next gen.
Intel Pentium processor
For the next generation of compatible power. You're kidding, right? Yeah, next gen. Probably the only word that never comes to mind when I see a Pentium chip. Because that's old stuff, right, Pentium? Well, no, Intel is still pushing these chips on the market 2 decades and a half after its first launch in 1993. But of course, they've evolved since then, otherwise nobody would buy them. But some people will tell you that you're mentally defective to buy a stupid low-tier dual-core. It's only 2 cores, 2 lame underpowered cores with no hyper-threading. Hyper-threading, yo, the sweet stuff, the whipped cream of CPU technology. Some will say, why even bother with such a low-end chip when you could just get a whole second-hand i5 2500K or i7 2600K at the same price as the Pentium. And they're not wrong, that's a wise idea. Others would say that you should save some money and go all out on a Ryzen or i7, and that's a good point too. But what if you just don't have the money for it? What if you could only spare the money for a Pentium setup with an entry-level graphics card? Maybe you're trying to choose between PC and console, and your budget will ultimately decide. Is Pentium a complete waste of money, or something that can give consoles a good fight? For the sake of all people on a budget, I did the ultimate sacrifice. I went online and bought the kit. Ladies and gentlemen, here's my test of a dual-core Pentium gaming PC in 2017. I bought this kit, which consists of the most basic and budget-friendly parts I could find, without compromising on quality. All the prices you'll see are in Canadian dollars, so US residents, your prices are gonna be much lower than that, and should be around the same for Europe residents. I'm sorry. First, the CPU, the Pentium G4400, dual-core on LGA 1151 socket, 3.3 GHz stock. It comes with the dreaded Intel stock cooler, but that shouldn't be a problem for this chip. It is from the Skylake architecture, 6th gen Intel CPUs, and is currently retailed at $58 from Direct Canada. The motherboard is the Gigabyte H110M-A. It's a micro ATX and has all the basic stuff you need for most people, like USB 3.0, PCI Gen 3, 2 dual-channel DDR4 slots, onboard HDMI 1.4 for onboard graphics, and fairly good audio with their high-quality capacitors. The Mobo currently retails at $64. Next in queue is the memory. Memory prices are still full berserk mode and they keep going up, but fortunately Amazon has that crucial ballistics DDR4 at a very good price, all things considered. And since we're doing a very low budget build, I want to stick, pun intended, to a 4GB stick. It can be upgraded later on anyway, so the RAM price is $37. Powering this thing is the EVGA 500 watts 80 plus white. I've built many computers with this particular model and have not encountered any troubles. 500 watts is a tad too much for this system, but it's great if you plan on upgrading later on. I like this one a lot and it retails at around $50. Okay, so case and storage is totally up to you. As you've probably seen, I went full ghetto with this build. The parts are spread and bolted into a piece of wood that allows me to put it on a shelf or move it around to diagnose parts I receive or change the motherboard easily for benchmarks and stuff. Storage wise, I took some old and defective laptop hard drive that work flawlessly, both of them are 250 gigs, and I strapped them onto the power supply with Velcro straps. I would recommend asking your family and friends for old useless laptops or desktop PC to salvage the case and HDD like I did. If you don't want to go as ghetto as I did and you don't have access to spare parts, you can get a Seagate 1TB HDD for around $55 and something like a Rosewell Ranger Micro ATX for $30. The 2 included fans make that case very appealing compared to the other ones of that price range. Shipping fees for a computer case can get quite high, so jump on Amazon Prime for free shipping if you can. You obviously can't really game without a graphics card, and that, people, is always the hardest part to choose. It's also the most expensive, so I thought a lot about it, and if you're really going to get a Pentium processor, chances are you're not gonna spend $350 on a graphics card. That would be ridiculous. I think this build calls for a GTX 1050, not Ti, at around $150. I would have purchased one, but I already had the similar priced and performance AMD RX 560 from Sapphire installed into my girlfriend's PC. So for the benchmark, I will be using the RX 560, and you can add a couple more FPS to each graphs for the 1050. So total system cost is $359 Canadian and $444 if you get the hard disk drive and the case brand new. Just for scale, the PS4 costs around $380, the Xbox One S plus one game costs $379, so we're approximately equal to a console right now. With all the shopping done, let's short those power pins and get ready to roll. Here are the gaming benchmark results. Our first game is Skyrim Special Edition. This game is releasing on Nintendo Switch, that's why I put it here. So 1080p high preset, minimum FPS 45, maximum FPS 61, and average FPS of 55.8. Next is BioShock Infinite. That's a pretty old game, but it looks gorgeous still. So DX11 1080p Ultra preset, we have 26.9 minimum FPS, maximum is 121 and 13, and average FPS is 76.32. It's running really smooth. Next is my favorite game of them all. It's Dark Souls 2 Scholar of the First Sin. It's an old game, but you know, people play old games, right? So 1080p high preset, minimum FPS 60, max 60, and average 60. 60 all across the board. This game doesn't exceed 60 FPS anyway, so that's the maximum you get. Next we have Dark Souls 3. I did a Cemetery of Ash run for 1 minute. That's pretty much the most intensive part of the game with the Firelink Shrine. So 1080p medium preset, motion blur off because I don't like motion blur. Minimum FPS 42, maximum FPS 61, and average FPS 50.32. So that game is pretty smooth, but those numbers are at the worst place of the game. Here is the beautiful Lara Croft and Tomb Raider, Rise of the Tomb Raider actually. So this benchmark is comprised of 3 parts. We have the Geo part, we have the Mountain part, and the Serial part. So I'll just, you can pause the benchmark to see the numbers, but the average for each one is 58.47, 67.03, and 45.18. The next game on the list is Overwatch. That's a Blizzard title, and it's the only one I include here. It's also the only esports game that I include here because it's maybe is the most demanding one. So you can scale with that. 1080p resolution, scale 100%, FXAA everything to medium, minimum FPS 34, maximum FPS 71, and average of 54.2. So a solid experience. Next is GTA 5, and that's kind of the oddball and the most, yeah, I'd say the most disappointing title here with the Pentium. It's not cutting it. 2 cores may not be the most efficient way to run a game like this because it requires a lot of calculation and stuff. So it was a bit stuttery. 8 gigs of RAM is a minimum here. 4 gigs too stuttery. I really don't recommend it. But with 8 gigs of RAM and the Pentium, I'd say you could get between 40 and 80 FPS. The last 2 titles are from Unigine benchmarks. Those are synthetic benchmarks. The first one is Superposition. It just came out and it really pushes the GPU, not much the CPU, but the GPU a lot. So 1080p medium preset, we have a minimum FPS of 21.1, maximum of 35.75, and the average FPS of 28.32. The other one, the last one, is Unigine Valley. That's an older one, but I really like this one. We have a minimum FPS of 19.4, maximum FPS of 69.6, and average FPS of 36.6. So that's pretty much it for the benchmarks. Alright, so let's put those numbers in words. We built a gaming PC with a $359 budget, around $450 if you need to buy a case and hard disk drive. We can now safely assume that we can play games very well with this machine at 1080p. From AAA to indie games and synthetic benchmarks, this low budget PC exceeded all my expectations, except for the performance on Windows 10. This OS chugs on a mechanical hard drive, but the situation could easily be corrected by having an SSD instead. Multitasking was kind of a situation too, having to close certain programs while running games or having multiple Chrome tabs open because Windows manages RAM like shit. Finally, the Pentium lineup has its place beside Intel's most famous core series, and I am very glad I tested a setup like this, proving that games can be run quite well on low-end hardware without sacrificing too much on performance and graphics details. The Pentium G4400 plus an entry-level graphics card combo has a lot to offer to anyone willing to take the big step to get into PC gaming without paying any extra compared to a console. Of course, this build is not suited for anything higher than 1080p, but it could be by only upgrading the CPU, GPU and RAM in the future, easily. It's just so awesome to see all the things you can do with so little money. Affordable and expendable truly are the golden words here.